Hello again and welcome to another Warlord Wednesday, the episode of the week where I normally talk about all things bolt action, but today I've got something different for your viewing pleasure. I'm going to take you through the amazing experience that I had at the Warlord Games Open Day. That's right, dear viewers, I went right to the source of my World War II plastic crack addiction, and let me tell you, it did not disappoint. I got to meet loads of incredible people, the staff behind Warlord Games that make the magic happen, and overall it was a brilliant and amazing experience. Truly a grand day out. And what I want to do is take you through that experience, share with you the tour of Warlord Games that I received, so that if you were unfortunately not able to go to the day, you can live vicariously through this video. And of course, if as you're watching this, you think, man, it would have been so cool to go to this thing, don't panic. Warlord Games does an open day every year, so if you like what you see, you can go along to the next one that they do. But that's enough of an introduction, and with all that said, let's not mess around any further. Let's dive right into today's episode. So the first thing that I want to do is say my thank yous. Firstly, I want to say thank you to Warlord for putting on an amazing open day. It was really well organized and ran. There were loads of stalls, all sorts of game systems on display, and it just went really smoothly. There were loads of staff members around, so if I ever had a question, I could ask it, and I'd always get a really friendly and helpful response back. Just want to say all of the staff members at Warlord, absolutely fantastic guys and girls. All of them were just so friendly, so nice, more than willing to help, and they all went above and beyond the call of duty. I was buying some Blood Red Skies for Commando James, and he unfortunately wasn't able to make it to the event, and he wanted some quite specific stuff. And I asked one of the people in the shop there, and this guy literally spent 20 minutes with just me as a customer, just making sure that he knew what I wanted, going into the warehouse and like coming back and just being like, is this what you wanted? Yeah, that's great. Oh no, could you swap that one out? No problems whatsoever. Unbelievably helpful. Like I said, went above and beyond the call of duty. Every single staff member. And I want to do a special shout out to my main man, Kieran. He is the guy that runs the affiliate and influencer stuff over there at Warlord, and he did a great job. From the moment that I turned up to the moment that I left, I was looked after. Any questions that I had, he answered them. Also, he was the one that organized the initial affiliate and influencer tour, and it was really good. It was really cool being able to see some of the other names in the industry, in the YouTube industry, I should say, actually there, like asking questions stuff. So some names you would recognize, such as the Restless Kaiser from Modeling for Advantage. He was there, and there's also Peachy from the painting phase, which is really cool, and a few of his teammates there as well. And it was really well done, and Kieran took care of all of us. Also, speaking of going the extra mile, speaking of going above and beyond the call of duty, Kieran, after we had the main tour, because there was obviously a lot of people trying to take photos and stuff, you couldn't always get the shots and clips that you wanted. So I asked Kieran, hey, could I go around again later when there's like, it's calmed down a bit, and get a few more shots and a few more photos? And he was like, yes, of course, no problem. I will take you around. And so I actually got a second tour, and it was really helpful. I would not have had half of the photos or video clips for your viewing pleasure today if it hadn't been for Kieran helping me out. So big 07, big salute down the comment section for Kieran. He really sorted me out. And lastly, but certainly not least, I want to say thank you to all of the channel members and supporters that came up to me and said hello. It was kind of mind-blowing. I had at least half a dozen, it might have been more than that, of people just coming up to me and just being like, hey, are you mordianglory? Oh man, love your stuff. And I honestly didn't expect that, because obviously primarily we cover Warhammer 40k stuff here, but every single person came up to me and was just like, I am so grateful. You got me into bolt action. I was all 40k all the way, and then I tried bolt action thanks to your channel, and now I'm absolutely addicted to it, and it's becoming my main game. And that was just so heartwarming for me, because I love bolt action of a game. I want it to succeed and grow and just get better and better. And so to have so many people come up to me and just be like, you're the reason I play this game, was really nice. So thank you to everyone who came over and said hello. It really made my day. But with all that covered, now let me take you on the tour. Let me show you what I saw on the Warlord Games open day. So I actually got to the tour a little bit early, so I had some time to wander around and take some photos and enjoy some of the things they had on display. And outside of the main building, they had a couple of gazebos set up. One of those had demo games for Black Sails and also for Pike and Shot and stuff like that, Black Powder. And then the other gazebo had loads of demo games in, and there was a couple of tables set up for Bolt Action. There was one for Conflict 47, which was very, very popular. Interestingly, I'd say it kind of felt from the couple of times that I wandered around the different games, like K47 was getting a huge amount of interest, and it always felt like there were people wanting to try out that demo game. And then you had a table for Blood Red Skies and also one for Cruel Seas, and they had a really cool demo set up for the Judge Dredd game. Now, I've not really paid much attention to the Judge Dredd game myself, but seeing the miniatures now and seeing the game, it's really tickled my fancy. It's really interesting, and it definitely feels like that old school, kind of quirky, kind of funny, kind of over the top 40k of yesteryear. It doesn't feel so grim dark. It is obviously very grim and very dark, but with the bright colors and everything, I really had like nostalgic flashbacks of 90s 40k look at that stuff, which was brilliant. It's an itch that I want to scratch. I want to see my models in big Technicolor. I want to see the bright garish color schemes, and so having that kind of vibe and seeing like the mutants and the judges like battling it out, it was really, really cool. So I don't think anyone expected, not even me, but one of the games that I thought was really cool was Judge Dredd. Definitely something I'm going to be checking out in the future, along with Conflict 47. But after I'd finished wandering around and the rest of the affiliates had turned up, we then got the tour, and the first stop was actually amazing. It was crazy. I got a little starstruck, I'm not going to lie. They showed us into a nice big office, and in there, not only was the head of Warlord Games, John, which honestly, it blew my mind to have the head of a company that I have really kind of like revered and looked up to for a while now, just like, oh, would you like a biscuit? We've got some double chocolate chip cookies here. Don't worry, we don't bite. And I know I feel like I'm taking the piss out of him there a little bit. I'm not. It was actually really nice and really friendly. But yeah, it was just crazy. And seeing him wandering around, like offering biscuits to people, not just in our meeting. He didn't stay in his office. He came down and was constantly just wandering around and just talking to the people. And it was just amazing to see the CEO of a company just being so friendly and so personable. And I got chatting to him for about 20 minutes as part of this affiliate meeting some of the people that run Warlord Games. But some of the other names there, wow, people that I have known about for a long time. Like I said, I got kind of starstruck. I wish I'd got more photos and more pictures, but I was kind of just soaking it in. I was kind of just there, just looking at these faces, looking at these people, probably looking at them in a bit of a weird way. I wouldn't be surprised if someone thought that I came onto them. It was just like childhood dream come true for me. And, you know, seeing people like Rick Priestley there, you know, he wrote the games that I grew up on. It's just like, wow, the man, the myth, the legend is there. You know, Alessio is there, Jervis Johnson, Andy Chambers. It's just like, just wow. Honestly, it just took me back. So I didn't get as many pictures as I'd like. In fact, I actually spent most of the time just chatting to John and some of the others, and it was a really, really fun experience. I did manage to get a picture of John later on, and if I remember, I'll put it up on the screen now, of him literally just waiting around in the entrance to Warlord Games with a tray of biscuits, just being like, "Go on, have a biscuit." It was so good. And like I said, from top to bottom, all the people that I met, all the people that I chatted to, every single one of them was just great. And what I mean by that is they were just nice and personable, and they were human. And I think it was a really viable thing for me. And if I was to go back there again, I would definitely, and I hope to go back next year, and I get the opportunity to meet them again, I would hope that I could play it a little bit more cool. I'm not fanboy quite as much. But it was just nice to actually realize that these people are human, and I got chatting to them, and they actually loved the game. to them, this isn't just a business. To them, they are people that like tabletop games, who still play tabletop games, and they bring that energy and that enthusiasm and that personality, and they inject it into the products that they create. And I think that really comes across not only in obviously the products that you buy from Warlord, you bolt action. They're always bringing out new campaign books. Oh, maybe it's one that people don't know so much about. I mean, I personally think that thanks to bolt action and Warlord games, people now know a lot more about the Italian front in World War II than they used to, because it used to just be, well, everyone's watched Enemy at the Gates and everyone's watched Band of Brothers and that's it. And now people are learning so much more, and that enthusiasm and that enjoyment is genuine, and it comes across in the products that they make, and most importantly, it comes across when you're talking to them. They're not, I don't really like using this word, it feels a bit modern and new age, but they're not fake. They are just the people that they are, and that is so nice to see. But eventually, Kieran came over and dragged me away from basically talking John's ear off and asking him 100 million different questions, which I'm sure he was relieved about. We then moved on to the next part of the tour, which was the painting studio. Now, this was actually the first time that I've ever seen something like a painting studio and a design team, and it was really eye-opening. Because as the consumer, I kind of just consume the product, right? I buy the kits and I build them and I paint them and I use them, and that's how I really interact with the models. But actually seeing the amount of effort that goes into creating the sculpts and creating the designs, it was really, really good. It really made me appreciate how much hard work goes into that. So there were a couple of different parts of this studio. There were the model sculptors and designers. One of them was still doing it with like green stuff and everything. But what was amazing was to see how Warlord has begun to adapt to the new technology, to the new age that is coming, that is 3D printing and 3D designing models. So one of their other people that was there, all he did, he said exclusively, I just design the models digitally now. I don't really do any sculpting or any green stuffing. And even the green stuff guy was like, yeah, probably at this point about half of the models I make are with the green stuff, and the other half is with digital. So it's amazing to see how about 75% of the models that Warlord is creating now and designing is being done with 3D printing and being done with 3D technology. So that's really, really cool to see. They're definitely seeing it, they're adapting to it, and they're taking it on head on, which is brilliant, and they're incorporating it into their business. So that was fantastic just to see actually the mentality that Warlord's got towards it, and they see it as a tool to be utilized, and that was really, really fantastic. The other half of the studio was the painting team, and Warlord has about 4 dedicated painters. One of them exclusively paints like the sci-fi stuff, one of them exclusively paints the Napoleonic stuff, and then there are a couple of them that basically paint anything and everything. And just seeing the different techniques that they use for the different eras is great, because this is something that I don't think you really understand if you're like a 40k player, because obviously 40k everything is bright and garish, and you've got guardsmen running around in bright green and blue uniforms, and you've got space marines running around in bright yellow power armor. That looks good, but to be able to have a realistic looking color scheme, a one from a historical perspective that doesn't just look completely drab, is really, really hard to do. And so I got chatting to the chap that does the Napoleonic era stuff, and he was painting some American Civil War bits, and it was amazing to see how realistic he'd got the color scheme to work whilst also making it pop. I actually got a really, really, really lot of respect for that guy, because he has quite a difficult job, and being able to make it not just look like a drab realistic like camo scheme or military uniform, being able to make it look like the greys, and also you've got the Union uniforms, and then how you make it pop is you have those details like the flags and stuff that are flapping over the regiments. Really, really cool. So it was really, really nice to chat to that guy, because it definitely gave me a great appreciation of what it's like to paint historical miniatures, not just paint the more Hollywood style of sci-fi. After the painting studio, we then moved on to the dark arts, the arcane magics, which is the skill of resin casting, how to make models out of resin. Now, this is kind of like when you buy something from Forge World, it's that hard resin. It's when you're buying one of the more unique models from Warlord. So if you're buying not just like a Matilda 2, which you can buy in plastic, but if you're buying the Matilda 2 Frog, which is the more sort of out there variant, rather than buying a Churchill, you're buying a Churchill Crocodile. You get the more unique stuff from the resin casting, and they're often more finely detailed than the plastic stuff. Of course, resin is a little bit more of a funny material to work with, and unlike plastic injection, it actually definitely feels like mixing potions and stuff in the dungeon. It's really, really cool. I loved it. So the guy that was telling us about the resin, he really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. Like I said, this whole thing was just enlightening from top to bottom. And he showed us how they use the molds, and there's difference between how there's molds that you can just pour the resin in and you just scrape it off, and then you just basically pull, let it cure for a bit, and then you pull the model out. And they've also got, for bigger models, they've got like, they're called like split molds, and they've got like serrated edges, and you can open them up, and then you do that and you tease the model out. That's for like bigger bits that you can't basically bash out the mold. But it was really, really amazing, just understanding that there were two different kind of molds, seeing the kind of molds that they use. They're made out of like silicon and everything. And they basically, what they do is they mix the resin, and they try and make sure they never waste more than, out of each batch of resin that they mix, and it's kind of like, I think it's like done by hand essentially. Out of each batch of resin that they mix, they try and not waste more than 50 milliliters. So that's quite a good tolerance. So they say if we waste more than 50 mil, that's like bad. We always try and get way less than 50 mil. So that's quite good. Like they're all about like not wasting material. And then they pour it in, and then they basically tape it up. They tighten that mold as much as they can to stop anything from leaking out, and then they leave it. And what's kind of cool is they say it takes about 4 to 6 hours for the resin to set. So something that they pour in the morning can be ready by lunchtime, depending on what it is. Something that they pour at lunchtime is ready when they finish the day. So it's quite interesting seeing the process. And it's both, what I feel, it both feels quite new tech. It feels really interesting about how they've got all these different unique molds, and they're all very bespoke. But then it also feels like kind of like old school as well, where like you literally mix it up by hand, pouring it in, and then like taping the mold up to make it as tight as possible. So it's really interesting seeing the combination of what feels like a new way of doing things and sort of the more hands-on old style approach you've got to take. And the thing I got from making resin is it felt a lot more personal. It felt like there were a lot more human parts involved, and it felt like you almost were like, sounds crazy, but does anyone remember the old Lindt chocolate adverts, like the chocolatier, like, and he's like, pouring the chocolate in, and he's got like the uniform on, and he's like mixing it with the whisk and everything. It kind of felt like when you're making a resin model, it's kind of like you're making a fine batch of chocolate. You need the chocolatier there to make sure that it all goes smoothly. But there was one thing that totally blew my mind, and it was when somebody asked, I can't remember if it was myself or another member of the tour, how often can you use one of these molds before it gives out? And the guy running the resin part of the tour said, well, if we're unlucky, sometimes we only get to use them 3 or 4 times before they essentially break. But typically it's about 40 models per mold, and then we have to make a new one. And that just staggered me. I was completely taken aback. Because you hear online a lot about Forge World models, and you hear online a lot like, oh, well, the reason that they can't make the model anymore is because the mold's given out, or the reason why the models from Forge World are always consistent is because they're not, like, the molds are giving out. And I'm thinking, hang on, that doesn't sound right to me, because unless Forge World is literally never replacing the molds, they're literally just running them into the ground constantly. They're never changing them around. That just doesn't seem right. Because the impression I got from the Warlord team as well, we make 40 models and then we have to make a new mold. And if you're a big company like GW and you're obeying those kind of tolerances, you would have been, that doesn't really make up for the fact that your models are always coming out from Forge World quite badly. So the only thing that makes sense to me is literally either what they call submasters and masters. These are the models that the company uses to make the mold with. They press it into the silicon, they make the mold with it. Either that's where the problem is, Or GW literally is just not replacing their molds. They're just not doing it in any way, shape, or form. And that sounds crazy to me, because when you're reading online about this kind of stuff, you assume that, or you think, the impression you get is GW makes the mold and then they just use that mold and they use it and use it and use it and use it and use it. But what I got from Warlord was not that at all. What they said was, we use a mold and then we fairly often have to replace them because they give out. So it totally altered my perception on how molds are used. You don't just make one and then you use it forever and ever and ever. You make one, you have a very limited lifespan on it, and then you have to make another one. But after we had seen the old traditional ways, we then were shown the new ways. And the next part of the tour covered Warlord Resin Plus. Now, if you've not heard of this, it's a relatively new product that Warlord Games has come out with. And it is essentially all of the advantages of detail from resin models, all of the tiny things you produce with the resin, but the product is basically plastic. It doesn't require scrubbing or cleaning. You can trim it and file it without worrying about any nasty particulates. And it's so quick. The guy that was showing us around, basically, this part of the tour, he took the mold, and the mold looks like a metal model mold, and we'll see those a little bit later on in the video. I might have a picture of one now, but it's basically like a metal mold. It's two halves, and you press them together, and then there's a hole in the top to where the plasticky, resiny stuff, the material, whatever it is, gets squirted into the mold, and you put that into the machine, and you press. All the machines are like pre-programmed with how much resin they want to put in and how long you want to leave it to cool down. But you put it in, you press a couple of buttons, and the feeling I got, by the way, side note, the feeling I got was the intensive part of this process is the programming bit, not the model making bit. Because the model making bit was put the mold in, select the program you want, press the big green button, the mold goes up into the machine, you hear it squirting the new material into the mold, and then it comes down and you wait 30 seconds, and then you open the mold and it's there, and it's cured, and it's ready to go, and you can bag that up and you can send it out. And no bullshit, no word of a lie, this model was more finely detailed than the latest stuff coming out of Games Workshop. It was better quality than anything I've seen from Forge World, and the detail was comparable to the latest stuff that we've just seen announced from Games Workshop. It was crazy. And the fact that on top of this, the material is ultra recyclable. So if they do have any issues, it's not a wasted product. What happens is they basically have a giant grinding machine, and they just put all the sprues and bits that didn't quite work into the grinding machine, and it just grinds it down into a coarse grain, a coarse powder, and then they feed that into the top of the machine that makes the models, and they reuse it. It's 100% recyclable. It's amazing. So it's very, very impressive what Warlord is managing to achieve. I know a lot of us see them as like a traditional company that likes the old ways, but they're definitely on the forefront as well. Now, the final part of the tour that we moved on to next was the bit that I was most excited for. It was the metal casting. Now, if you follow me for a long time, you know I love my metal models. I have all of my old Mordian Iron Guard in metal. I've got a full Steel Legion army, which again, I just picked all those models up in metal many years after they were released. And some of my favorite Bolt Action models tend to be the ones in metal. I like the German Winter Officer with his furry coat and his little attendant. I really like the medic for the Japanese running around. Just there's so many cool models that are made in metal. And I totally appreciate that people prefer plastic, and there are advantages to it. For example, the paint doesn't seem to chip off as much, but there's just something about having a metal model. Firstly, it's super easy to build. They're often single piece, just stick them on a base and you're done. But also, they tend to have a bit more character. I don't know if it's because a lot of plastic models these days are designed digitally, or a lot of assets are reused on certain models, or maybe it's just Games Workshop's penchant for using tactical rocks everywhere. But you find with the metal models that they have a lot more character to them, especially the older ones, which have been like hand sculpted. But you also have models that tend to feel like they're in more natural poses. If you've got a squad and a guy's like aiming a rifle, a guy's like reloading and kind of as much as they're doing. Rather than it feeling like someone's stood in a pose in midair, it feels like they are actually moving across the battlefield. And as the models move around and the guy who's aiming moves through the squad, it kind of almost looks like the squad is moving and advancing and firing and reloading. So I really, really like metal models because they tend to be a bit more characterful, easier to build, and they're just, to be honest, a lot of nostalgia. I hold my hands and say there is a lot of nostalgia to it. So coming over to the metal bit was, like I said, the bit I was most looking forward to because I am an absolutely metal fanatic. Our host for this part of the tour was a fantastic chap called Peter. He's actually an Australian guy, and he used to do some casting back in the day for Games Workshop, and he jokingly refers to his time there as serving the Dark Lords of Mordor and all this kind of stuff. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's kind of there just for a bit of a joke for the crowd, because if you don't know, Warlord Games and GW actually set up and operate in the same city, in Nottingham in the UK. So it's kind of funny. It was like, oh, that lot over there, oh, yeah. But it's, like I said, very much done as a bit of a joke. There's no real negativity there whatsoever. What is cool is that he's been working for Warlord for the last 7 years, and how he starts his tour and how he starts his part of the experience is he takes you through the history of metal casting. We, or should I say I, don't want to speak for the people, perceive metal casting to be an older style of making models. And it has been around for a long time. But the technology has continued to advance. And the molds that they use now and the technology they employ now is very refined. It essentially works with the same principles, and they have like a big scientific book of how to like do metal casting, and there is an art behind it, there's a science behind it. But essentially what has happened with metal casting is the basic process was figured out relatively early on, and what has continued to happen is it's just got more efficient and they've just got better at it, and the technology for like the molds and stuff is really where things have been progressing. So it's great to see that what is seen as a relatively sort of like old time, like traditional way of making models is actually still very much still pushing forward, and they're constantly finding new ways of doing stuff. What was also really, really cool was Pete taking you through the process and explaining how the material wants to behave, how the metal wants to work, how they keep it really hot. It's like 280 or 300 degrees. And but if you take they scoop it out of the ladle and they pour it onto the side, and it instantly cools. It wants to become a solid again. And so seeing that, and then basically just taking that metal and just plopping it back into the vat where it instantly melts down back into a liquid state again is so awesome. I've got a little bit of a scientific background to my education, so just seeing how something goes from a liquid instantly basically into a solid, and then just picking it up and putting it straight back and it's going back to liquid, it's just so cool. And what they do when they're actually making the models is they scoop out the stuff with the ladle, and they've got basically a big centrifuge. And they put the mold in the centrifuge, and then they close that the lid, and there's a hole in the lid, and they pour the metal in, and that pours it into the mold, and then they spin it around, and it goes super fast, and it spins round. And depending on the size of the model, if they're just doing like spears and shields and small models, then it takes about 30 seconds. But if they're doing like a big thing, like a bear, then that can take up to 2 minutes. But they spin it round because that allows it to get into all the corners of the mold, but also it's about allowing it to essentially have enough time to cool down, because obviously if it's a big thick metal model, it's a solid core of metal. Solid in a lump like that will take longer to cool down, unlike when it's spread out over a flat surface. So you have to give it time to go into the right places, but also really importantly, you have to give it time to cool down because it's in that sort of big blob. It was really interesting. Honestly, that's the word I would describe for it. It was fun, and it was interesting, and it was educational, and it was great seeing how the models that I love the most are made. And that was really the tour. After that, they took us all into the sort of open bit of the warehouse that had been open to the public, and there were benches set up, and they were handing out free sprues of US Airborne and Fallschirmjäger and clippers and glue, and you could just sit there and just have a go at building some Warlord models and get a feel for how the kits were. And it was just a lot of fun, and there were lots and lots of happy people building their models. And what I thought was really good is those people that enjoy it so much, they then go into the store and they buy some more, and then they build them, and it was just amazing seeing so many nice wargamers having fun building models and just enjoying bot action and the other game systems as well. what was really the cherry on top, what was the icing on the cake, was as I'd gone around on the tour, I'd picked up a few free models here and there, a few from the metal casting, a few from the new resin bit. Also, they'd given everyone that had come along a goodie bag with a Desmond Doss model, which was amazing, and a few other little bits. But Kieran pulled me to one side at the end and said, as an affiliate, as an influencer, we've actually got another goodie bag for you, and we've personalized these to each affiliate, each influencer, because we know that you do different stuff. And the one that I got actually had a copy of Tough Gut and some Alpini, some Italian Alpine troops, and that was amazing because I've had my eye on the Italians for a long time. Kieran, I don't know if you watched this video, I don't know if you knew, but Italians were the next army I was thinking of picking up. So getting this Alpine box, now I don't have an excuse. I can't put it off any longer. I've got to get them going now. So that was so good. And I really appreciated the extra mile that Warlord went. Like I said, when it came to the influencers and affiliates, they definitely made us feel special. They looked after us. And overall, it was just brilliant. Perfect way to end the day to get a nice big swag bag. But that's it for now. I hope you really enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button and leave lots and lots of comments down below. If you want to see more bot action content, I am planning on reviewing the Tough Gut book and also an unboxing of the Alpini troops, and you want to see that and lots of other bot action videos that I do, then don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. But before we go, I have just one last question to ask you. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier patrons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Bonbonvert, Ken Starr, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. You are incredible. Your generosity is truly humbling, and I could just say 1,000 times over and over again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.